Hey, welcome to episode 1 of the Inside Events podcast by Swapcard. We know all of our event professional colleagues are super busy, and a podcast is really just the perfect way to talk about and to learn about industry news and to talk with industry insiders and those thought leaders in the industry who really are the ones who are moving and shaking, making things happen in the industry. And they're definitely people that we can learn from. So on each episode, just kind of laying it out for you since this is episode 1. My joke has been you only get one, number 1 episode. And so we're going to discuss trending news in the industry. We'll have a different co-host with me each episode. And then we'll have a stellar top industry guest or 2. I'm your host, Megan Powers with Powers of Marketing. My event industry experience is pretty extensive and varied. I have sold audiovisual production. I've worked in a venue, selling events in a venue. I used to joke that I sold everything from a centerpiece to a widescreen high-def show, and it's a fact. And then working as of late, the last 6 years or so with my business with event technology companies and helping them to market themselves. I also have been a podcaster for the past few years, and so I'm super excited to have the opportunity to have a podcast that's exclusively related to events. So today, our awesome co-host with me to chat news is Nick Borelli. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hey, so if you have not heard of this guy, you just have not been paying attention because he is on every show of note. He is speaking at every show worth attending in our industry, and he seemed like the natural guest to have on today to talk news. I'm going to give his bio real quick. Nick's consultancy, Borelli Strategies, focuses on marketing solutions for events and event companies. He's an international speaker and has been a member and volunteer with numerous event industry associations. He's also the marketing chair of the event industry nonprofit, The Search Foundation. If you haven't heard about that, look it up. Awesome organization. Nick has been named a changemaker by MeetingsNet, awarded International Volunteer of the Year by International Live Events Association, and has won numerous marketing awards. He has served as an advisor and ambassador for associations, conferences, technology companies, and numerous event suppliers. He is obsessed with telling stories that change behaviors. Well, I think that's a pretty good, quick description of you. I know I could have given the long one, but we only have so much time.
Yeah, as brief as possible. I mean, the cool thing is that at one point in my life, I was marketing audiovisual, and then prior to that, I was marketing venues and spaces. So I did sales before that, and realized that was not the place for me. But I've had similar experiences on a different side as you. And it really helps giving you that 360-degree, positioning when you can envision an event from behind the scenes as well as, out there with the attendees.
For sure. Yeah. And I plan events now too. So having that perspective is super important, especially from the technology side, because as we all know, planners are often sort of scared of technology and they have nothing to be afraid about. And that's hopefully one of the things that will get through and help our listeners with through this show. So It's been a kind of a slow news time, right?
It's the summer.
It's the summer. People are on holiday, but one thing that has not changed, that continues to be the thing in 2019 is sort of what some are calling the cannibalization of small event technology companies. One company in particular has been on an acquisition tour, if you will. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you're just expecting to see where the other domino will fall next, right?
Yeah, for sure. And inevitably, over the years, I've had conversations with people in every one of these organizations that they've acquired about this cannibalization issue. Now, I can't fault them because why start a startup unless you have an exit? And
Totally.
Everyone needs to make money. So I totally understand that. If you don't know yet, the company we're talking about is Cvent, which is actually was a few years ago acquired by Vista Equity. And so they are an investment group that saw an opportunity, right? It's a hot market, clearly, and they're trying to, someone actually said, I'm curious what you think. I had a friend tell me that they're buying user lists basically by acquiring these companies. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, there's something to be said there, especially with people who had the parallel offerings. Like, for instance, a Doubledutch, sure. I mean, that's, they're buying market share and they're buying user lists in order to, because at the end of the day, like, technology lives and dies by your user base. That's why there's so many pieces of software that are the biggest pieces that the world uses that don't charge the users anything, because it's the list itself that is the value. You look at social tables, on the other hand, and I bet you there's a ton of overlap there between what they have or something completely different when it being venues. And I look at that and I say that's probably more a technology and maybe people acquisition, of being able to, in that kind of DC environment, be able to grow something that size sustainably, culture. Like, there's a lot of like positions why you would make that acquisition outside of just user base. So I think that there's some of them, like lately it seems like that's the move, but there's been a few like infrastructural things where it's been more about like, let's broaden what we offer, and that's also like maybe take an infusion of some of maybe organizationally some fresh takes. But ultimately, like, I think I'm of two heads of this whole thing. I can be really objective and say it's an incredibly healthy place for our industry that this is happening. Like that there's acquisitions happening at all levels. Hotel acquisitions are happening daily. Exhibition organizations are happening daily. It's the technology sector is a part of that. So like, when you look at it from the real macro perspective, the idea that this level of investment is being made within live experiences, and this consolidation is an inevitability of there just being so much more fruit out there and so much more money being left on the table. It just shows the vitality of where we're at in an industry that can now kind of prove its worth. So that's exciting.
Right. For sure. And as you said that, though, I started to think about price now, right? Because the thing is, the fewer companies own the hotels, the fewer companies that own the AV companies that are in the hotels, the fewer companies that own the software companies, then there becomes they're controlling cost, right?
Yeah. I mean, look at the hotel compensation for third party, and just planners in general. That happened because of an acquisition. The Starwood acquisition made them the most powerful, and with that power, they had the ability to enact pressure, and that pressure created a domino effect that went through all the majors. And that's the new paradigm, is 7%. And will it go further? I mean, my guess is yes. But ultimately, that's less choice equals more power consolidated in fewer hands, and that's a negative to users as long as there isn't enough. You have to kind of balance it. Like, if there is a market, I kind of do trust at the lower levels capitalism to work, because I believe that like there's still an opportunity for smaller organizations to do things in a nimbler fashion, and maybe to compete if it's that threatening. But if they're adding more value and they're adding more price, I'm fine with it. If they're just freezing out and stagnating, I think there's so much opportunity for growth in the events industry that's probably not possible. Like, they have to keep progressing at a pretty good clip, or the opportunity for VCs to throw it behind a small business and grow to be competitive is always there.
Right. Well, it's interesting because when you said commissions, my brain first went to commissions that the hotels charge their vendor partners, like the audiovisual companies and the companies providing power and internet. Because as the commissions go down for salespeople, the commissions are going up for the hotels and what they're, and so it's a pass on, right? Like, everyone who decides to go with the in-house AV is getting charged a rate based on the fact that that company has to give the hotel a huge chunk of money. So, being cognizant of that when you're using in-house, I think is important, but also they're using it to, how you say, force planners to use in-house versus out of house also, because if you don't, then they're going to charge you more.
Yeah, to get out of the way. I've been on both sides of this as well, in my, as someone who's been on event teams as well as being in audiovisual at one point. And, you get into these deals because it's promised money over time. And you, as the planner, you kind of feel like you're stuck with somebody, but it's one of the overall decision-making things that you have to make when you choose properties. PSAV has grown, and through acquisition, as much as any of these companies that we mentioned previously too. So they, as like one organization, has been doing the same kind of thing, because they know that the same market freezing and control and market share is ultimately, one of the best ways to be competitive is to have less competition. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, if the planner is more worried about security and things that they can rely on, the larger organization generally provides that, I suppose, if you look at the whole tapestry, because they have more layers and they're probably likely a higher likelihood of being able to stand behind everything that they have. Not that they're perfect, obviously. Everyone has a bad story with any organization that's large, because it's large. Right. From property to property, there's probably little in common, other than maybe the training and the tools. It's the people that really make the difference between, a bad experience and a good experience.
For sure.
But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I understand, like, there's both sides of it. I just think that, like, we're in the big leagues now, right? And it's just part of being in the big leagues is this consolidation. I mean, one of the biggest fears I have for the events industry a few years ago was data silos. And one of the opportunities that we have with less organizations housing data, and more under the same umbrella, is that we have better data, theoretically, pure data, because it doesn't have to go through all these different sources. And I know there's organizations that are working on, more shareable APIs, which would be even better than that. But ultimately, data is one of the, if not the most valuable output of live experience. So again, just to be the devil's advocate of everyone else who is probably groaning, saying, I want a bunch of mom and pop technology companies. When it comes to data, that's not awesome.
Right. Well, and data is definitely a topic for another time. Okay, so let's see. Real quick, let's talk about there was an announcement made last week that TSA, and for those of you who aren't in the US, that's our Transportation Services Administration?
Security
Administration. Yeah, so they're the ones at the airport. Well, they are pulling hundreds of TSA agents to man our border. So,
yay.
Right. The result of that is going to be longer lines, longer waits. It's already affected a lot of people who have been trying to apply for the global entry. I have a friend who couldn't get an appointment, and they said, oh, well, the next international trip you take, when you come back in, you can, do your interview. So, and then to read this article after hearing that from her was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Any quick thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I look at everything from the macro perspective and the objective perspective first, mostly because, like, I'm a detached strategist, and that's my default view. I outside of all, like, the political aspects of all of this, which again is difficult to extract, anything that shows our country to be less than easy to deal with in a international experience is kind of something that it makes me upset. I think that language has to be really important. I remember when this administration had a conversation about borders previously that affected travel and even meetings. The language itself was too broad, and that was something that affected travel. But yeah, I just had an enjoyable experience in Canada for a live event put on by MPI. Canada's right there, and they don't have that same kind of negativity associated with travel currently, and there's threats everywhere to this as a revenue stream. And they just showed this big travel report recently that came out that showed America's still right up there at the tippy top for a lot of meeting destinations, but that's precarious, and I'm just concerned about that more than I'm concerned about the micro. I'm going to be a little bit late. Like, I have TSA pre-checked, so at least for domestic flights, that's not as seemingly hit by this. Clear seems to be probably loving this. So there's options, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned that, because Clear, I've said, they don't have it in my home airport. It's not worth it for me, because that's 50% or whatever the percentage is of every time I leave here. That's the one I have to deal with. So,
mine just came in 2 months ago, so that's what made the same
gotcha.
deal.
Well, but yeah, for sure, because what I read was that TSA will be bumping some people over from the other lines into the TSA pre, and so the TSA pre lines will be even longer potentially.
Yeah, that long in some that aspect of some airports has creeped up to be almost as long, sometimes longer than the actual line. So that system is not what it used to be as far as their projections, and they're trying to sign up as many people as they can. So honestly, I think I don't know. We have to realize just how many people come to our country and how much perception plays into this beyond the realities of some summertime slowness and getting to airport a little sooner. There's an overall impact that I really hope that they work on.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just do one more news piece before we bring our awesome guest in. Live streaming at events. Now, this article came out on MeetingsNet recently, last week. Pro tips for live streaming your events, and truly, this is not new. It shouldn't be newsworthy, but why do you think? I mean, I kind of, the whole video thing, I think, is something that still show organizers shy away from, because there's still this impression that, well, if I give them access, especially if I give them live stream access, they're not going to come. They're afraid that their registration numbers will be hit. And I think we've learned for years now, I mean, we've been talking about this for 10 years at least, virtual meetings and hybrid meetings, and streaming some of the major industry shows were just refusing to add video as an element of their show, for fear that folks won't come. What's your take on this as being news and what's happening there?
I think it's news because I think the people of MeetingsNet attend a lot of events, and they see a lot of ad hoc, strategy-free video streaming, and they probably know that they could do some good by letting people know that this is no longer anything remotely considered a trend. This is here to stay. Right. Live video streaming of experiences is something that is responsible, it is revenue generating, and it is an experience unto itself that deserves the attention of someone who is programming it specifically for that screen. The additional opportunities for data collection and brand equity around sponsorship, and just having people test the waters is so huge. But in addition to that, like while this isn't like going to like change the world as far as audience growth, which is mostly what I talk about, I look at the people who physically can't make it. Like people with disabilities, like the idea of getting in a plane and going somewhere. I mean, that's a lot, right? And they deserve great content, and they deserve to have their lives, changed as best that we can provide for them as well. So it's really nuanced, but I think the most newsworthy aspect of this is, like, I think it's kind of time's up on strategy-free streaming. It needs to be something that you look at the camera and you program that designed experience. You know, people talk about like, well, let's have theater in the round because it'll make these people feel this and that. But no one really gives people that kind of attention when it comes to the stream. They just plop a tripod down somewhere and put their phone on it, or they have AV, you know, turn an iMag into some kind of streaming platform, and not really consider that. Maybe, do you want a one-to-one experience? Do you want something that's so analogous? Do you want instead maybe green room, more intimate conversations with speakers? Program it like you would program it if you were sitting in a chair at home. And I think that if you think about time and how people spend time and how you break it up, it should deserve all that. And the good news is if you do it well, for starters, there's not a lot to do, so you can be at the top very quickly. But the second part is that you can bring unique sponsorship opportunities along for the ride, which, you know, should pay for all of this added attention. So
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's my view, is that it's newsworthy and it's important because it is officially something that we can't be scared of, and that we have to embrace in order to grow the, you know, there's so many more shows in all divisions. To be able to have people understand what your event is about, you have to give them absolutely every opportunity. Like this fear of missing out thing, while, you know, it is absolutely a buzzword that is kind of eye roll inducing and groan inducing, which I've been more into, like the JOMO thing. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm more into the JOMO part, the joy of missing out. But that said, like it's still a phenomenon powered by social media, and the way to gauge the reaction to the digital streaming is something that you can gauge in a lot of different ways to be able to track through social media. And when you do that, then you can put more dollars behind it because it's a verifiable endeavor.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that there's, well, and you can as part of your strategy, live stream some and have other paid. You know, there's a revenue stream there that
archive.
Yeah,
there's tons of stuff. I don't do one-to-one. You know, if I'm working on a design and event and I get to impact what we do with the design of the streaming element of it, I create other opportunities, usually in green rooms or in some small rooms with speakers, and in an interview to talk about what the, you know, top tips from the session. But I try not to make it just a camera in you know, far away from a speaker trying to capture it, because that's not what it's like to be there.
right.
Nor do I want to give people the wrong impression emotionally about what my event is. I want to give them a designed from the beginning to the end experience, and therefore I usually take advantage of the Q&A and the intimacy that digital can provide, and then also, you know, make sure to have questions that are kind of what did the audience feel, what did they react to, in order to like make people, you know, want to be in that audience, right? So I think it's a little different than just kind of the lazily put a tripod on and, you know, hit Facebook Live, which again, a couple years ago, I would say that's great. Doing that puts you way above everybody else. I think we've just crossed the threshold now where it's not novelty anymore. It's just a tremendous opportunity.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay, so we are about midway, where we are going to go from Nick being a guest to Nick being a co-host. Welcome, Julius.
How are you?
Oh, we're well. How are you?
Pleasure to be here.
How are things? How are things out in Las Vegas?
Oh, it's hot.
Yeah. Shocking. Okay, so for those of you listening, our second half of the show is guest Julius Solaris. Another name, if you don't know it and you're in the industry, you have been living under a rock. His mission is to help event professionals to be more innovative, effective, and successful. He has been named one of the 25 most influential individuals in the meeting industry. He started Event Manager Blog, the top blog in our industry, hands down, in 2007. It is the #1 blog worldwide for event professionals. He's also the founder of the Event Innovation Lab, We'll talk about that. An immersive training program for Fortune 500 companies and high growth event teams. He is the author of over 10 books on event technology and innovation, the Event Tech Bible, the Good Event Management Software Guide, meeting design, the future of the market. I could go on and on.
Isn't it fun to hear this stuff, Julius? Don't you just want to be like, yeah, okay, it's cool. I don't want to talk about today, like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not good at talking about myself, so I'm the worst one. So yeah, I'm like, start sweating whenever my body is red.
Yeah, you're making sure you did it all. You're like, oh, okay, I did that. You're like, maybe I should slow down. Jeez.
Yeah, it makes me feel old as well. Like when it was one book, it was much easier.
Well, I was counting the 12 years since 2007, and as she was saying that, I was like, man, that's a long time in this, in this business.
Yeah.
And Julius, how long have you been living in the U.S.?
3 years next week.
Okay.
So, yeah, 3 years. Exciting. Love it.
And he's in the hub of events, basically, or one of the major spokes, at least, Las Vegas. I can't. It's funny because whenever I tell someone that I'm going to Las Vegas, that's so exciting, and I'm like, it totally would be. But when you go there for work, as often as I do, it becomes a little bit less sparkly.
Yeah.
I have like the inability to make memory markers in Las Vegas now. It all becomes one Las Vegas thing, because like it's like the landscape is so like kind of thematically the same. While there's all this crazy new stuff all the time, but like I don't remember if I had a conversation with you 5 years ago there, or 3 years ago, or last month.
It was in October.
Well, I mean, literally with you, it was in October. Yeah, but I just I forget. Like it all becomes one jumbled timeline.
It is. Yeah, I mean, they make it very confusing. Though it's changing. It's changing a lot. The way hotels are rebranding themselves as, on the experience side, the gambling is going down, and occupancy in May was like 7% up, despite gambling going down. Wow. So if you look at those two numbers, you see immediately how people are coming for different reasons.
That's cool. That's
an
identity shift.
Yep.
Yeah, no question. Okay, so let's. I want to kick it off with you, Julius, to start in talking about your new endeavor. It's not new, but it's newer than blog. The Event Innovation Lab.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us about what your purpose is behind it and where you see it going. Having said that, I did attend one in Los Angeles, one of your events, and it was actually quite awesome, especially as someone who is also planning events now. Getting your perspective and learning about how things are shifting was really nice. I think that was almost a year ago now already, was it? Or longer?
It was, yeah. It was a year ago.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's pretty new, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about that. I've been speaking in the industry since 10 years now. That this is my 10th year anniversary. I started in 2009 as a professional speaker. I've been going up and down and around, and we know all the problems associated with speaking in our industry and how tough that can be. And I know Nick is there, is ready to have a chat about it. But it's I don't want to be controversial here, but what I'm trying to say is that it can be challenging if you're running a business and you have clients and you do stuff, and to speak at the same time in an industry that has a tendency not to pay for speaking. So I tried to find a way to still keep my speaking engagements and my speaking up, while at the same time, be connected to my audience and launch an Event MB initiative, and sort of still going around in the country, in the US and outside of the US. So we started last year. We did 3 events last year, and this year we're doing 4. And there are smaller events. They're more intimate. It's by application only. We review each and every single application. We try to keep suppliers on, not because we don't like them, but because we want a room of planners, and that's increasingly more difficult to find at meetings around the world. It all ends up with people looking for business, mostly suppliers, in all of the rooms I've been at, even the most high-end events. at the end of the day, there's going to be always someone with different motivations for sitting down and listening to a keynote that is meant to be for event planners, because at the end of the day, what we do on EventMB is we talk about planning events. We don't talk about selling to event planners. So my talk sometimes doesn't go well with some of those suppliers because they're there for generating more business and more leads. I'm not there to provide that. So I thought, what if I could just have planners in the room and really talk about the issues that we know are relevant to them, or we anticipate being relevant to them. And even more than that, we actually ask them, what are your issues? What are your challenges? We customize the program each time to reflect what the actual room wants, not even like what our data says that what they want, like what the actual planners want. And so at IMAX Frankfurt, for example, where we did something like exactly this, essentially we had to turn down 85 people that wanted to attend, and we still had a 4-room with people sitting on benches and stuff like that, standing to listen for 3 hours to myself and other speakers. Also sponsors, obviously we involve them on a content level, which I think is the next step on how you produce content for events. Like, how do you coach sponsors to provide meaningful content, because they have the data, they have the expertise. It's just like, how do you deprive them of their urgency to sell and make them useful for the audience, which we're still working at, but we're getting good results and we're tweaking the format every time. So, and then the second reason why we started something like this is because we have a community called Insights, where we same proposition. We just filter the content out just for planners, and we just approve planners into that. Probably we'll open it up for suppliers later on, but for the time being, it's just for planners, and it's just our intimate environment. And these events are meant to be sort of in life, face-to-face representation of that community, where the members, which are now 1,000, can get together and interact with that sort of horizontal exchange that they long for and they asked for a while. So it's a sort of a meetup opportunity. And obviously our big event in this series is going to be at IMAX Las Vegas, where we're going to have Jeff Hart presenting. We're going to have Kieran Hardline, who's been director of events for Mashable and many tech companies in the past. Myself, we're going to have parties. We're going to do a lot of stuff at IMAX. So we're very excited for that, which is going to be kind of the apex of this year. And then the next one is going to be in Seattle, here in the Northwest Event Show.
I love it.
Another exciting one.
Yeah. So the sort of crowdsourcing some of the content is something that is of biggest interest to me, because I think if we only assume that we know what people want to hear, then you have a missed opportunity. So, like, have you attended any of the Hot Dokimazo events? So
no, I haven't. But the first ever proper article I wrote on my blog was about bar camps and open sourcing the event format. So I completely espouse that type of approach. So yeah, love it.
Crowdsourcing what people want to talk about and giving some
Voting.
Opportunities to talk is great.
Voting with your feet is one of the most powerful things you can do in a live experience. I mean, the buying signals that you get from that as an export of data is really powerful. But just for your time, I mean, think about how much time is spent on motivating people to click here instead of here. But think about how little that is of value in comparison to like where you spend an hour of your time. Like, think of all the things you can do in Frankfurt with 3 hours, right, up against what you offered, and then you had that type of reaction to it. That's very meaningful. Like, it's the quality of that tells you a ton about not only what you offer, what those people want, but why you have those sponsors is because they understand that it's about quality and it's about penetration into people's minds, that they are telling you that they're opting in a way that is, I think, a lot more powerful than a lot of other things, which I guess brings me to my question. So 2017, you said discounting tech in favor of other elements is being short-sighted. It is biased towards tradition, which is an interesting way to put it. And it is risk aversion and resistance to change at its best. Tell me more about that, especially the tradition part. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we can still, that's still applicable in 2019, if we can still have that type of conversation. I mean, I'm kind of, I took the leap, and, in the latest report we did about, elevating your job from event planner to event strategist, really one of the items, like one of the major forces driving this change in terms of the evolution of the job that event planners have and how they're required to be more strategists today. One of those reasons why this is demanded out of them is because there's a generational gap. There's a generational divide right now in the industry, which is by no means based on age, but more mentality. And the mentality is, I'm going to embrace whatever it's new. I'm going to embrace tech as one of the items, like I look at the venue, I look at the F&B, whatever it is, look at tech as an element for it. And some people are like, oh no, we're in the face-to-face industry and everything should be analog. But that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because most of the tech that makes sense for events is actually in the back end. It's not even attendee facing. So you're making an argument that has no value whatsoever. You're just being inefficient. So I'm not even talking anymore to that type of audience, because I think they're going to be out of the industry sometimes. So they're going to do something else probably. They're going to just go and hold and embrace people and hug them and feel good with themselves. But, this is not what the face-to-face industry is about. And, the event industry is about efficiency. It's about being extremely attentive to details. It's about, creating a flawless experience on the operational aspect first, and then on the engagement, the connection, all the great things we like to talk about. But the operational efficiency, how are you going to achieve that in 2020 without a software? Please do explain it to me, because I'm speechless. I don't know how, I'm still convincing you that we need a mobile app for an event, because it should be more.
I see those conversations. They're still happening. And I agree. I agree that, I think I said this around that same time, that there's just that meteor is going to destroy those dinosaurs, and those dinosaurs can yell at that meteor as much as they want, but it's coming. So, and I guess that's probably not an apt comparison, because the meteor, well, I mean, it did bring us eventually, but it sounds like a negative thing. Ultimately, I think that some of the pain points come from the fact that they have refined, to be like devil's advocate, because I try to have empathy with the people that I'm trying to understand. Because I've talked to the same people, I think that you're referencing as well. I think that they've highly developed their gut to be able to be really pretty powerful. The problem is that it's still a gut, which is weak sauce. Like, it's not verifiable. It's something that impresses a CMO. Like, your gut says what? Person who ostracize themselves from the marketing and put themselves in this little camp called events, and don't see that where they actually go together. But I think the pain comes from the fact that they have built a trade around almost like mysticism and shaman-like talents, which I believe are actually probably, their hypotheses are probably awesome. But that's as far as it goes, right? They never get better, and they can never prove it. And I think that's where the technology comes in.
Such a shame, because, if you would put that sort of instinct with,
Totally.
Data, and you combine the two, you're set for amazing success. And it's such a shame to see, so many opportunities missed out, or so many savings opportunity, even on a, vendor sourcing or stuff like that. I'm just going to give you this tidbit of information. So as part of a report, an analysis that we're doing this month, we're releasing about the state of venues and how they are. So I was speaking to a planner, and she told me that she had to call a hotel 3 times in a month in Vegas, because a group she was bringing there. Essentially, they were giving her a group rate that was consistently higher for 3 times in a row than available rates on booking.com. It was very interesting to me. So I decided to go and have a look. I took a sample of 50 events worldwide, US based mostly, but also Europe and Asia Pacific. And consistently, I saw the rates published for groups on event websites being higher than whatever was available on booking.com. This is like one of the largest scams that we'll ever see in our industry. Like the level of depthness of some hotel chains is beyond ridiculous. And you have to think that, with these group rates that they get, you have minimums, you have, fallback clauses and all of that. Your hand, like if you don't get them like 80%, you're screwed. You have to pay for it. And, at the other end of the spectrum, there's substantial savings. We're not even speaking about similar properties close by that are half of the price, similar level, or Airbnb. But what I'm trying to say here is that, first of all, like a technology-enabled planner would know that from the get-go because they're searching. Obviously, the planner I was talking to, she was very out there with tech, and she looks at all these websites. She knows what's going on. And she was able to call them up and say, what are you doing with me? Like, why are you giving my attendees a higher rate than what they can get on booking.com? And the other part is, while I was doing this research that brings me back, I would say that 49 out of 50 of the websites I've seen, they seem they come out of 1997. I mean, that's not acceptable. Like that was my personal upsetting part. And that's not a part of the research that I do, but I want to share it with someone because it's so hurting to see that type of web design. We talk about creating experiences and all of that, and you land people on a 1995 looking website. I mean,
right.
How do you reconcile that with your desire to plan experiences if tech is not part of that experience from the get-go? I mean, that's the first impact in most cases we're going to have with you.
It's so funny, like you see how much time that they spend in their design of their booths, and yet they realize that their website is their booth 365 days out of the year. The people that they'll never meet, right? Like, and the pain to see, the sales process analyzed and, the right people in the bus, for the booth. And yet, there's not live chat. There's not, an intuitive UX. Like it's simply just, and I deal with a lot of associations, it's worse there, like the archaic designs.
This is not by no means bashing here because,
they have a lot on their plate.
Bashing, they're already you have so much going on. I mean, it's just like, I do feel you. I do understand you. I'm not like coming here and say, oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. This is more of, okay, our job is evolving, and our job today involves also taking care of, the technology side of things, whatever tech impacts on the experience side of things. You would, when I was presenting trends in 2012, I used to have a slide where I was like, would you have your attendees go to a bathroom that looks like that? And it was like a trash bathroom. Or would you serve rotten food or gone food to your attendees? So why do you put them in a situation to experience something like that, especially where web today is like so pervasive and we're so full of all the Amazon experiences. I order something on the internet, the next day is on my doorstep. Like, how do you compare with that? So that's what we should be thinking about. Even thinking about it makes a huge difference, because the next time someone is selling you a crap software for $50,000, you're like, wait a second, I can get the same thing for like half of the price because I did my research. I have it as one of the things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I think having like a really regimented phases of an event that starts at the first piece of content that attracts someone all the way through to the extending proposition. If you look at things like that and you have the same level of conversation of each phase, you give things the weight they deserve, because you really respect the user / attendee journey. Otherwise what you're doing is you're segmenting it and saying marketing is this and the event is this, or post event is this, and it's one thing, right? And I think that's part of the problem, is these silos that are not taking into consideration the life of your attendees.
And Megan, as a marketing expert, I mean, I would go back to what you said at the beginning to a certain extent. I started my innovation lab with one stat that we look at, looking at all the stats over the past 2 years, where consistently every piece of research on the event industry is saying that between 40 and 77% of event marketers, CMOs, are investing in events as one of their main marketing activity. Their actual main, most effective marketing activity. They're willing to invest more. The next slide is, let's not fuck this up, because, you know, honestly, that's one of the biggest opportunity ever. I'm sorry for cursing. You can
It's okay.
but, you know, truly, you know,
making sure the editors get paid.
Nah.
This is what we've been asking for, right? Think about 2008 and how desperate, you know, so many events being cut during the crisis because it was a waste of money. So all of a sudden you have this money coming in. The problem is that CMOs don't think like, you know, whatever, a CEO that asks you to do an incentive trip and how was the event? Oh, it was great. High five.
That's it.
I loved it. Let's hug each other. Let's move on. CMOs want accountability. They want accountability. So how are you going to present that? Because the problem is, as soon as the money comes, the money goes if it's not well spent, if it's not well accounted for.
It's symptomatic that we're living in this age of acquisition around that same time, because now that there is the ability to adopt technologies to have some sort of verifiable results. Prior to that, like I said, everyone's known that an event breeds more positive brand equity, pipeline growth, everything that you'd want to hear than a piece of advertisement in a print magazine. Not that, you know, that there's no place for that, but it breeds a stronger connection. The problem is the magazine said we had so many magazines and people read them. And events had a binary, again, those, you know, plateaued shaman would be like, it was a good event, this binary, you know, good, bad, meaningless chatter, as opposed to, well, we increased, you know, the outcomes were put into our CRM, number one, so look and see the results yourself. You know, they didn't understand the stakeholders and understand that different stakeholders have different results. They just didn't strategize around that. They just said it was good. And it was put in this kind of like bucket of money that we know it's good, and when we're doing good and the event is good, then we'll keep doing them, as opposed to any other piece of marketing. And I think digital pushed events to this point, you know, because of just not only does the technology exist to audit these experiences that didn't exist before, but when I put money into Facebook, I know what I'm getting, and I want that from everything. Right. And if you can't give me that, even if I know in my heart it's better, I just can't accept it because I'm spending other people's money.
Correct.
100%. Oh my goodness. Okay. We could talk forever on that, but I want to switch gears just a little bit. And it obviously it's all connected. It's all interconnected. So it's not like I'm totally going off the way, but, so your industry trends report that you, put out in December from Event Manager blog, detailed the ways things are changing. One key element is that we've been moving from events to experiences, and now we're needing to charge our participants or our planners to transform their events. Yeah. Is it we're trying to get the events transformative or the attendees to transform what they're doing, or both? You're 6 months out from that report. What do you think that things are happening?
I invite your audience. I mean, I think honestly, I mean, I've been saying this because, you know, I'm desperately in love with the subject, and you know, we've published last week a report that honestly, to be honest, it's probably the best report we've ever published. And I don't say that because I'm here talking to you guys. You know, I'm like, I don't care like if people download it or not. It's their issue. But with this one, I care so much about, because Jeff Hurt wrote probably one of the biggest, best,
that's a get.
You know, science of experiences ever written, is being able to dissect what we mean by that. Because that's the role that we have at attendees, to clarify confusion. So that's what we do. When, you know, new things come out, event apps, whatever they are, we do the event app Bible. When the new experiences come up, we do the experience report to the science of experience design. So that in that report, we've outlined specifically, first of all, there's confusion. We've done 1,100 event professionals research. We've published the results in terms of what people think an experience is. The level of confusion is crazy. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, some people think, oh, it's about being memorable. Some people think it's about, you know, purpose. Some people think, you know, all great things, but completely different. We also cross-referenced like if you have events with high budgets, what do you think an experience is? And you would see that how that varies and how that interjects with the budget. So I invite you to read that. But in terms of the transformation piece, that obviously comes from, you know, the experience economy books. And Joe Pine, and we did a webinar with one of the authors, obviously, which was once again one of my highlights of the year, together with Merritt. It was great, and how they were discussing together with Greg Bogue, obviously, who's a legend in the aspect here. So first of all, like the idea that I come to your event and I get out in the same way, that's where events fail. So if we get stuck that into our minds that they need to get out in a different status, like they have to get out in a different feeling, emotion, learning experience, completely different from when they got in. So we have to, this transformation piece has to come across. Now, a lot of the criticism we're sort of drafting drawing today to the science of designing experiences as opposed to designing events is that a lot of people think that design experiences is creating stunts as, let's have, you know, spitting fires on stage and have BMX rides and have people with bands like walking in and everybody cheering, which is great, but appeal to the dumb part of our brain, which Jeff explains so well. You know, the neuroscience of it, like, is the part that was going to reach out to their phone, take an Instagram picture and have 100 likes and call it a day and say it was a great event. But what do you get after that? Pretty much nothing. You're going to get more. It's a dopamine-induced type of sentiment that acts like a drug. And that also puts your event in a spiral of have to do more and more every time. So what are we going to come up with? What is the next event idea, event theme? The budget is not enough. You know, budget is never enough. We're the highest economy ever, and budget is not enough. So that's sort of the spiral we want to avoid. And the transformation piece has to pass through content that is designed also in a way to elicit that transformation through horizontal interaction and connection, which we pass. You know, this podcast is for a mobile app, that it's about connecting people, and that piece is the one missing in most events, because at the end of the day, we evaluate experiences, we evaluate events based on the level of interaction we have with other people. So how do you connect attendees on the show floor with meaningful connection that involves the right part of the brain, the ones that plan, the ones that learns? That's going to lead to transformation in most cases. That's going to be making some events incredibly appealing. Now, you still have to use fun, you still have to have stunts and great things, but it's a great way to get into the brain. But once you're there, you have to do good. You know, you have to do something more. You know, a lot of us stop right there and say, oh, we got into the brain, we got the Instagram picture, boom, job done. But what's next? That's the question that event planners have to answer.
Yeah, well, and I would argue that having keynotes that aren't just the awesome CEO from X brand, but somebody who is actually going to encourage the attendees to make change, to transform, is a huge one. Like, obviously, Julius, you were great keynote at IMEX last year, and I would put you in that category. I attended San Diego's Social Media Day on Friday, and the closing keynote was like mic drop. He was amazing, and he gets our space. His name is Brian Fanzo, and I think, Nick, you know who he is. Julius, you might also know who he is. But he's somebody who should start speaking in our industry, because he gets it. Like, he encouraged everyone in that room to walk away and make a change, and I guarantee that everyone felt changed.
Let me tell you something, if we're not too long with time, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Yeah. Sorry, I enjoyed the conversation so much, and I stayed in the room too much. I should get out more and talk to people more. But you know what one of the things, you're perfectly spot on. It's actually one of the examples we do in our lab, not in the one you attended. Actually, as in the next labs, I put this example talking about the different parts of the brain. And I make the example of Content Marketing World, which is a great event. I'm not picking on events. I don't like to pick on events, you know.
It's in my town, so.
But, you know, the choice they made, if they can make it better, it's obviously a big example. You know, if I pick on them, they're not going to be affected by it in any way, but it explains to others what we're trying to say. And, they picked Kevin Spacey as the keynote, right? That backlash by itself. But what I'm trying to say here, what is the connection that I'm having as a content marketer with Kevin Spacey? I mean, I can be inspired by it.
Every year they do a stunt like that too.
Great story, fantastic. But what next? Like, what am I getting out of? Like, what is the transformation in my job? Like, this is a business event. This is not like a life transformational event. It's a bit like I have to get something from my business. So even though we may share some great stories that may resonate with something, am I really making an effort, the best possible choice, or am I just going for the big name that is going to be, oh, I was there when Kevin Spacey was there, and amazing. And I make the same example with RSA having Bill Gates on stage, which, for a software company, security conference, the largest 50,000 exhibition, most concentrated in San Francisco. Bill Gates is a big name and has that powerful effect of saying, oh, I was in the room with Bill Gates. But you know what? Bill Gates can actually teach me something about what I do, which is software and my environment. So it's not about, taking off the wow effect, because at the end of the day, we need a little bit of that in this modern world. And I'm not saying we have to go like in, closing ourselves in cells and just learn, but
that's a fine line.
Balance. Yeah.
It's a fine line. Like to give you an idea, like content marketing world has done those kind of like big names, Tina Fey, Shatner. This year it's Henry Rollins, which I believe will, as someone who's seen him do spoken word before and kind of knows what he's about, I think it's the first kind of bold choice in that position, because yes, he's a quote unquote celebrity, but he has way more to say to content creators potentially of like punk rock ethos that if done right. So I'll take your point that it's a really hard line to be someone that, is what people feel like they need to have to say that they were there and also deliver on that. I think that some industries don't have the best ambassadors than other industries, and that makes it a little bit challenging.
Let me challenge that, Nick, because I like to challenge Nick when we have calls like these, and going back.
I love it.
Let me challenge that, because what are we doing there? Like really going with the big name is laziness. Effectively, we're paying a big fee in return for big, noise about it. Like you could use that money to strategically find the people that could elevate that meeting into something different, revolutionize the concept, do a different keynote. People are going to still talk about that because they're challenged. Like, they feel like Haute Dokimazo or any type of format, or having a strong moderator that is able to connect people in a meaningful way using technology. If you have 2,000 people, think about the results you could have. Think about conferences, how they started with proceedings. Like, they were like a means to get people together to work on something, and create something abstract, something that would stay there.
I think some shows are too big, and that's why they have to fall into some larger choices. Like when I look at like a C2, for instance, like, the majority of the like conversation that happened from the speakers was Spike Lee, who in that environment, it had something that was really interesting to say. And it was what we needed in the time that we're living in right now. So it like kind of resonated to a bunch of people who are creatives, in a pretty broad sense. But they go after a really broad audience. I think what you're saying really works for events that are niche and offer like business solutions that are very specific. When you start saying, well, we want to appeal to all these broad different groups, then the business outcome type insider speak becomes harder. And then at that point, like content as an umbrella is everything, right? So content marketing world tries to shoot for, people who I guess potentially plan events to social media director. I mean, it's a broad, canvas, and therefore they try to go broad. And so, I mean, again, I like to be the devil's advocate. I don't go to those keynote speakers. I'm the least likely person to go to an opening keynote. Anyone talking about inspiration, I'm sleeping in. I am all about like niche content and like pretty much nothing else. That's all I really care about. So I'm with you on what I want is what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like
I just know that there's people that need different things. And I look at post-event surveys, and I have, just as many negative things to say about those as I do anything else. And those names pop up, and maybe you're right, and probably you're right that the residual energy of that is probably very fleeting. But if that's your only kind of ROI, then you look at those. Unfortunately, you weigh those post-event surveys way too much.
They're trying to sell tickets, really, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the laziness is that they're trying to put butts in seats, and they think if XYZ is the band, if XYZ is the keynote, that they're going to sell more tickets. And I think what I hear you saying, Julius, is that's not necessarily the case. That they might, if they add more value, then you will see your show grow by the value that and the transformation that people get from it versus the temporary feeling of that was a cool person to be in person, right?
Rude told Miguel something that he told me through the chain of 2 weeks ago, was that it's like blowing my mind, and it's making it so concise. People choose to go to, now this is specifically conferences, but let's say events, but conferences based on reputation, the same way they choose which university they go to. So when you have a dream university, you don't actually have a dream lecturer or a dream professor. You think you would, right? Because they're the star. They're the ones that are actually going to put their knowledge in your head. But instead, you actually just trust the body to have the results that you want. And I think that's how it really makes me think. I think that's how most people vote with their time when it comes to conferences or events. If they trust in the legitimacy of the outcomes of how they'll feel and change with an organization, then they'll invest sight unseen to some extent, as long as they keep producing it on that value proposition. But it's more a question about 365 days of credibility than it is about, we've got Kevin Spacey this year, which is probably has diminished return in 2019.
But yeah, I mean,
No question.
That's also the problem. I mean, what you said is 100% spot on. An event like Content Marketing Board, you have to put together the event planner, the social media manager, the marketing manager, and you name
Directors,
it.
small businesses. It's
you
crazy.
have to put them in a room listening to a keynote. That's the problem. Why are you putting them in a room listening to one keynote? Why don't you do a party? Do a party. Do 2 parties. Do 3 parties. People talk about the party anyway. Do a mega buffet. Do something else. Connect them.
That also.
Why do you need to put a keynote that maybe appeals to some people because you're trying to be transversal? That's why I'm saying, you have the $50,000, spend them in a different way, that probably could put together. No, we have to go keynote, breakout, lunch, breakout, keynote, closing keynote.
Right.
And that's, you've done a conference.
Right. Boom. Okay. So we could go on about this, I think, forever. We're getting towards the end. And so I do have a quick question I would like. And one of the other things I heard on Friday, Julius, was from Pat Flynn, who you probably have heard of. And he said, podcasting is the new blogging. Now, I am curious what you think about this. I know that you have reduced the amount of content that you're putting out, but basically what he meant by podcasting is in its infancy by scale. There's millions and millions of blogs, and currently there's only about 700,000 podcasts. And now in our industry, even, we're seeing more and more companies and organizations getting on the platform. Mike McCallan is now helping associations start podcasts. So kind of what's your take? Smart. Absolutely. 100%, a great pivot for him. What do you think there will be a saturation point? Kind of what are your takes as you sit talking with us on a podcast?
Look at me. Okay. I don't want to come across as, know it all. I know my thing, first of all,
right.
I'm in my little space and my little business, so I have to make things work for me. So things that may work for me, maybe, they don't work for someone else, or, that they may not reflect what the zeitgeist is just my little world and my little industry. But I believe that, blogs are dead since years now. There's no blog. I mean, websites have become blogs. Blogs have become websites. Today we mean a website. When we talk about a website, we mean what a blog, the structure of a blog is, with
right.
Refreshed content that has a capability of appealing to either search engines or social media to be shared so that it reflects But, you know, blogs as they were born when I started 12 years ago, you know, probably the kind of similar medium that you have today that reflects that, it's probably Instagram. That's it, you know, in terms of the aspect that we had back then, you know, having an idea or, you know, some visual and publishing it with some personal, you know, vomiting on a subject that people would probably like or probably don't. You know, they were meant as a diary. So they've evolved, the content has evolved. The problem here is that content has evolved. And the way that people look at content, you know, with social media effectively gone, because, you know, social media has gone. I was looking at the referral traffic I got from Twitter. I got 5 link clicks from Twitter today. 5. You know, which is embarrassing. Like, honestly, it's embarrassing. Like, for an account,
5 more than I got.
You know, 50,000 followers that we have on Twitter, you know, we have 5 link clicks on it. And not because we're not doing a good job on it, but because effectively any type of linking, you know, value, traffic value that we used to have from social media is now gone as a content producer. Now, I'm all for podcasting. What I like about podcasting, I like the personal touch of it. I like the fact that a lot of people commute. You know, it's very personal. It's very, you know, someone is talking to you. It's very one-to-one. I love some of the podcasting that he's been doing, like especially when it's about investigation, you know, where cold cases, you know, I'm talking outside of the business related people that, you know,
but that's an idea.
Super vertical, you know, that sort of thing like excites me. Like, what I don't like is when people like say, oh, this is easy. I can just grab my phone and start recording, or, you know, like doing a YouTube. I'm heavily invested in YouTube, like very invested in YouTube. We have one of the biggest channels for the event industry there. We have almost 13,000 subscribers. You know, I've never been a fan of pointing my phone and say, oh, let's do a video and share my idea. No, I respect content. I feel there's got to be a plan every time you do content. So I'm a great fan of those podcasts that have a content plan in place and they spend the time to create a product that's great. You know, and then the medium, how you do it, whether it's going to be YouTube or a blog or medium.com or whatever you use, people are going to love it and I'm going to love it. But when it's podcast, it's just an excuse because they don't have the time to sit down and think properly about what they're going to do. And writing a post sometimes forces you to be that way. That's the problem with a lot. I've been writing with hundreds of writers in the past 10 years. And I know that when you push them to go in depth, they shy away, they go away, 90% of the people. The problem is that 10% of the people are really able to create that in-depth content that you need today. So if podcast does that, fantastic. People prefer it as opposed to reading. We know that already. So, you know, fine with me. I don't mind that. I know that my traffic doubled year on year, so I'm happy with that. So, you know, even if people like reading is going down and podcast is going up, my traffic doubles. So I'm fine with it. As long as you do it properly, people will still come. So yeah,
I agree that the beginning, middle, and end that writing like somehow naturally has forced people into doing because they still have some memories of being taught that at some point, or at least they've read enough to see that arc is one that is, you know, kind of fundamental. For whatever reason, when you start recording someone, they like right now, I don't know the next thing I'm going to say, and that's being recorded. That's the problem, right? It's like those kind of moments where you have things less scripted. And I think that, you know, we're in this, like you said, this infancy of the medium. Hopefully, you know, there's a wheat and chaff separation at some point, because based on conversations that I've had over the last couple of weeks, I know that there's about 12 to 13 that I can think of podcasts that will be out in the events industry by this December, new, that aren't out right now. Because I like to be a guest, so I'm, you know, whatever. Because that's how I get around the free speaking. Is I just don't. I'm wearing sweatpants and a button-up shirt.
Business on top, pajamas on the bottom.
This is it. So my free speaking is, you know, if I don't have to get in a plane, then I'm all about it all day long. If I have to go, then I don't. And I think that like where podcasts potentially have the advantage over the linear, I think the written word has a much better ability to reiterate its point without being boring. I think that the idea of getting into the mind and emotions of someone through theater of the mind, and then having the personality really be the selling point, is something that comes across in video and audio mediums a lot more. So I would lean heavily on the personality in podcasts, and I think that they have it. But if it's content marketing for suppliers or whatever it is, I mean, I think that whatever, novice person then that they put on that position, it's going to be so hit and miss to determine if that's going to be that, because I still haven't seen many people invest, industry insiders or C-suite or anybody at that type of thing. And those people crave that so much. The two things that they're not getting in content that they crave, and to the point of the success of Event Manager Blog, is that there is not enough data. So it's all just nonsense of gut. And that's where you're really coming out, on top of everybody else. And the other is personalities that come through as passion that reads there, that you trust them, and you kind of invested in those personalities. Those two things will pull people in, back you up what you're saying, and do it in a way that is memorable and unique and credible because it's authentic. You do those two things, and the medium is irrelevant. There's just some mediums where one side does a little bit better than the other side. I
like it. Well, and part of the reason I was asked to host this particular podcast is because I have experience doing it, and I'm not just going to sit here with an audio recorder and give you 11 to 24 minutes of whatever it is that I think. I want to bring in the industry thought leaders like you guys and have interesting conversations and have people challenge each other. Like, there's no one answer. And everyone, I think, listening to this will hopefully get a feel for what this show is going to be about moving forward. Hopefully there was a middle, a beginning, and soon to be an end. And to that end, I would like to ask you, Julius, what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
EventMB.com for the blog. So to access all the research we've been talking about, we make our research publicly available to everybody that wants to get a copy of it. To Julius pretty much everywhere on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Julius Solaris, so Instagram, whatever.
And the report that you mentioned, that when will that be out?
The Science of Event Experience Design was out last week. We got 2,000 event professionals downloaded in less than a week, which is mind-boggling.
Wow. Okay. Well, if you share that, I'll find it. That'll be in the show notes.
And by the end of the month, we're going to have the research about venues, which is going to stir up a little bit of ideas there, because essentially planners are being ripped off by venues. I mean, we've been seeing that for a while.
Right.
Proof.
Well, and I had an experience not so lovely with planning my high school reunion, and I went down a long road.
No, you cannot throw the rock and then shy away. I want to know the story.
I said from the beginning, I have a social group. I don't have an event at your venue, but I have had a room block before. What can you do for me? Made it clear that I wasn't going to deal with attrition. And we went all the way down the road of me getting the agreement, weeks and weeks and weeks. And then there was an attrition clause. And I said, I can't be on the hook for this social event. Anyway. So, all right. We're gonna wrap up. Nick, what's the best way to that for listeners to get a hold of you?
Just Google me. That's the easiest way. It's all Nick Borelli everywhere. I don't have any clever names or anything like that. So it's,
one R, 2 L's.
Oh yeah, 1 R, 2 L's. If you know that, then the rest of it is just put it in Google like you do everything else.
That is perfect. Well, I think that this was an awesome conversation all around. Thank you so much, Julius, for being our very first guest.
And good luck with the podcast. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you. Inside Events will be, as of right now, will be out once a month. And starting this month in July of 19. And you'll be able to find us on Twitter at the EventProfs. So that is that's our show handle. And we want any input, feedback. If you want to be a guest, please, you'll be able to reach us there. Thank you, Nick and Julius, so much for being our guest on episode 1 of Inside Events. And we will catch you all next time.